manage users and then go to permission sets, and in the permission set just go ahead and click on new, create the permission set. Give it a name, click on save, and then you can give whatever permissions you want. If you want to give the permission to certain apps, you can click on assigned apps. If you want to give some other object permissions, you can click on object settings. So that is right. So let's say you want to give permission to apps, then go and click on assigned apps and then click on edit, then allow certain apps inside this permission set. Okay, Ravali?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Alright, seems we are all good. So the next thing that we are going to discuss is, so we now understand the profiles and permission sets. Okay. Now we are going to talk about data sharing. Okay, what is this data sharing? So far we have talked about whether a user can see an application or not, whether a user can see data in an object or not. But now we are getting into a different level of security where we talk about data security or data sharing. Okay. Here let us understand that there can be multiple people working in the same team. And sometimes we don't want everyone to see all the data. Okay. For an example, let's say we have accounts. Okay. And we have a certain profile, let's sales profile, and sales profile is allowed to view accounts. Okay. But within accounts, I don't want everyone to see all the accounts. Though I have given the permission to my sales team to see accounts, but I don't want them to see all the account records. Okay. So why do why do we do this kind of setup? Because sometimes it may happen that you do not want everyone to see everyone's data. Sometimes you might want some people to have access to their data only. Some people should have access to everyone's data that way. Let's say Arpan is a sales guy, and I think we were discussing the same example yesterday also. If Arpan is a sales guy, Nikhil is a sales guy. Nikhil does not want Arpan to see his data, and Arpan also does not want Nikhil to see his data. So that can be okay. So if I am dealing with certain accounts, or if I am dealing with certain cases, I don't want others to see those cases, or I don't want others to be able to edit those cases or accounts or opportunities. It can be anything, right? So that is where this sharing of data comes into picture. Okay. So this in Salesforce is called sharing settings, and in sharing settings we have two things. First is org-wide default. This is also called OWD. Okay. In OWD you define the default sharing setting for the organization, as the name suggests. Org-wide default. So the default sharing setting for the organization. Here you just define whether the data is within an object will be private or public. That's the thing that we have to define here. Here we just have to go ahead and say whether the data inside an object is going to be private or public. That's it, nothing else. That's OWD, org-wide default. The other type of setting that we are talking about here is sharing rule. What is sharing rule? Sharing rules is where you define exceptions to OWD. Got this? So in case by default you have made the data private. Private means only the record owner will get to see that data, will get to see the record. Public means everyone will get to see the data. Okay. In case you have made accounts private, we have made accounts private means only the accounts which Nikhil owns, he will get to see only those accounts. Okay, he will not get to see the accounts which maybe someone like Ravi Teja owns. Okay. If it is public, then everyone will get to see everyone's data. Okay. So sometimes it may happen that you have made the data private, but you need to define certain exceptions on those. Exception can be, let's say we are a company and the data for account is private. Now, Nikhil is going on a leave for 20 days or 3 weeks, and the company wants Ravi Teja to look after his accounts. So that is where we need to define an exception to OWD. Okay. Otherwise, OWD is applicable on the entire organization. For this, so this is the data sharing access which we can define. So Salesforce gives us two options for this. First of all, data sharing needs to be defined at the entire organization level, and you have an option of making the data private or public. Private, only the record owner gets to see the record. Public, everyone gets to see the record. Okay. In public, again, there are two options. Public read only and public read write. What is that? Public read only, public read write? Public read only means others can only view the data. They cannot make changes. Public read write access means everyone can see and edit the data. Like, so let's do this. Where do you do this thing? For sharing settings, you just need to go to setup, security controls. Okay, this time you need to go to security controls. Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It seems Alpana is having some issue.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So where do we need to go? We need to go to setup, security controls, and under security control there is something called sharing settings. See that? So this is where you have to come. Go to setup, security control, sharing settings. Alright. Now where you see the sharing settings, there you would see a complete list of objects, whatever objects we are dealing with. Leads, accounts, contacts, opportunities, cases, campaigns, user activities, everything is here. Okay. So when we see all these objects here, we have the option of making data public or private for each object. And you see lead is public, means what? Everyone will get to see everyone's leads. Activity is private, means only the owner of that activity will get to see the activity. So you will not get to see my activities and I will not get to see yours. Okay. So that is what this private thing means. You can click on edit button and then you can change the sharing settings for everything. So this is OWD, organization wide sharing default. Okay. So if you make leads as private, then what will happen? Only the owner of the lead will get to see that lead. Got it? So that is how it is. If you make it public, then everyone will get to see the lead. Here, so this is one thing that we can do in terms of controlling the data access. Like, now once we have made the data, so first option is either make the data private or public. So either allow only the owner of the record to see the record or allow everyone in the company to see the records. That is point one. Second thing is that whether you make it private or you make it public, there will be certain additional requirements on top of that. Till the time it is public, it's absolutely okay. So you do not have any problem. Till the time the data is public, everyone is getting to see that you don't need any additional things. There will not be any additional requirements. The moment you have made the data private, then there will be certain requirements that you will need to deal with. Requirement number 1 can be manager wants to have access. Now we have made the leads private, let's say. You are dealing with your leads, you can only see your leads. Now, don't you think the manager would also want to see what all leads you are working on? Otherwise, what leads you are working on, someone needs to see that what you are doing actually, how many leads you are receiving, what is happening with those leads and all. So your manager might want to have access to your data, alright? So, yeah, someone was saying something? Okay. So in private, there can be two scenarios. One, the data is completely private, you only get to see your data. And one other scenario can be your manager needs to have access to your data. Okay. So if your manager needs to have access to your data, this checkbox should be checked. The grant access using hierarchy should be checked. If it is checked on, it means that the manager will have the access to subordinates data. Simple. Alright. So this is what this OWD talks about. The grant access using hierarchy option talks about. Alright. Now interestingly, you see that this option, you do not have an option to edit this checkbox. You cannot turn it off for all these objects. So these are all the standard objects. So for all your standard objects, you do not have an option of switching it off. Which means that if you are putting your data in the standard object, your manager will always have access to the subordinates data. No matter what you do, the person who is defined as a manager of yours as per the Salesforce database will always have access to your data. Okay. However, for the custom objects, the objects that we have created, for those we have this option of completely making the data isolated to that user only. Alright. So if you have any such requirement that you want to put some data in the database object which should be completely restricted to the owner, not even the manager should view it, then you only choice you have to use a custom object. You cannot work with a standard object in that case. Got it? So whatever standard objects, standard tables, default tables that we have, for everything your manager will have the access to the subordinates data. And we do not
How
have
do you
an
get
option.
it back, sir? How do you get it back to original again? Cancel.
Original means?
I don't want grant access using hierarchy.
No, it is by default given. So you cannot turn it off.
Okay.
Fine. Even if you cancel it, you will see that those access was already granted. See, it is already given. We have no scope of turning it off.
Okay.
For custom objects, you do have an option, but for standard objects, you cannot do anything. You just have to be, you just have to work with that restriction. So, as I told you, that is a restriction on the Salesforce standard objects. Alright. So this, grant access using hierarchy comes into picture only if the data is private. If it is public, then everyone in the company sees my data. So my manager is no exception. He also views my data, right? So when it's public, then there is no point. You don't even have to be a manager to see that data. Everyone can see it. All right. Now, second requirement for your private data can be someone who is not a manager wants to see data. The reason can be anything. As I told, one reason can be Nikhil is going on leave for a month and the company wants someone else to look into his data and deal with those clients. The reason can be that something has got escalated and the company wants someone else to have a look into that, right? You're working on a special project and you need to get some sort of analysis of my client's information. So reason can be whatever, but the requirement is if the data is private and someone who is not my manager needs to see my data. That can also be a requirement, right? So if he is manager and he wants to see, then grant access using hierarchy is good enough. Okay. But if someone else, maybe my colleague or someone else who is not even my manager, someone who works in a different department who is not a direct manager of mine, he wants to view my data, in that case I will need to work with this sharing rules. So the second level of exception, where someone who is not the manager, he needs to have access to my data, then there we need to define the sharing rule. So in a way, sharing rule comes into picture only when we have made the data private. Till the time data is public, then neither this situation comes nor the second one comes, right? So all these situations are arising when you have made it private. A lot of situations, 70% of your clients or maybe 75-80% of your clients, you will simply have OWD as public and you will not even require any of these things, okay? Because most of the companies do not have that strict process. Most of the companies keep the data public, and till the time data is public, you do not have to do any second step for that. You don't have to worry that whether manager views or someone else views, no sharing rule, nothing else is required, right? But sometimes companies do have that sort of policy that, okay, no, I don't want others to see this account and all that stuff, right? So these situations will come only when we have made the data as private. For a certain object, I have made the data private, okay? So the second thing, as I told you, is the sharing rule. Sharing rule is used for defining exceptions to the OWD. If you scroll down here on the same page, first thing is OWD, right? Here we made it public or private. If you scroll down a little further, you will see sharing rules, okay? And we do have sharing rule for every object, okay? So let's say you want to define a sharing rule for leads or for opportunity, right? So as I was just talking about this example, let's say opportunities are all private. So Nikhil has his own opportunity, Arpan has his own opportunity, Ravali has her own opportunities. Now I want, so all opportunities is private, so everyone gets to see their own opportunities only. Now, as I said, Nikhil is not going to be there in office for 3 weeks. I want Arpan to take care of Nikhil's opportunities. Then I will have to define an exception on the opportunity sharing rule. Okay, so you have to understand which object are we talking about. We are talking about opportunity, so let's go and define a opportunity sharing rule. So this is going to be an exception. Okay, and this is going to be a temporary exception. This is again not something which is a permanent solution. So for some time you can define this exception rule, and after that you can remove this rule. Okay. So use sharing rules to make automatic exceptions to your OWD sharing settings for defined set of users. Right. So it is used as an automatic exception to the OWD. Just leave the second line. I'll talk about this a little later. You can use sharing rules only to grant wider access to data, not to restrict access. So this sharing rule can be used only for giving access. You cannot use sharing rule for restricting access. So that is what I was talking about. That it comes into picture only if the data is private and you want to give some extra access to some user. It does not work if the data is public and you say that no, I don't want Nikhil to see my data. It will not work in that way. If it is private, you can give access to some user, but if it is public, for public thing, and that's pretty simple logic. So when I say something which is public, you cannot go and restrict that something which is available to public. You cannot restrict that from one person. Correct? So it's more like something which is a public property. You cannot restrict anyone in the country to access that public property because that is public. So that is against law. You cannot ask someone that don't use the public property because that's for public. The same way, data which has been defined as public in the OWD, you do not have an option. You cannot define a rule saying that no, a specific user will not have access to that. That will not happen. This will only work when your data is private and you want to give some special access to someone. Got it? So it says the sharing rules can only be used to grant wider access to data. It's not used for restricting access. All right. Okay. The data that needs to be shared, do you want to share it based on some based on the record owner, or you want to share based on some criteria? You have an option of picking from some criteria also. Let's say you want to share all the data of a certain country or all the data with a certain amount. Let's say you have a criteria where you say that any opportunity which has a more than 50% probability of winning or more than 70% of probability of winning needs to be shared with someone else also, right? Because that becomes a critical opportunity for you, and it's at a critical stage. So after 70% you want to share it with someone else. Till the time the opportunity comes to the 70% stage, you just want it to be private. But once it has the probability of winning more than 70%, you want to share it with let's say the CFO. So simple, right? So that is how it is. Now, no, doesn't matter whether the CFO is uh, the manager of the opportunity owner or not. He will always get to see all the opportunities which have a probability of winning more than 70%. So you can define the criteria this way, or you can define it based on some record owner criteria. Let's say the data which is owned by director of direct sales should be visible to the customer service and support SVP. Alright, so that can also be done. Clear on it? Got this? And finally, you just have to define one thing, whether you want to give read-only access through the sharing rule, or you want to give a read-write access. Okay, so that is something which needs to be defined. Whether we want to give a read-only or a read-write access. Please let me know if we have any questions here. So we have understood the OWDs and we have understood the sharing rules. So pretty simple. OWD will define throughout the organization whether the data is going to be private or public. Once you have made the data public, then you don't have to worry, because anyhow we have kept data open for everyone. So then you don't have to worry about anything. Yes, if you have made it private, then you will have to deal with certain other requirements. So there will be two types of requirements which you will have. One, manager wants to have access to the data of subordinates. If that is the requirement, just work around with the grant access using hierarchy. For standard object, it's by default there. You don't even have to do anything. For custom objects, you have an option of turning it on or turning it off. Second requirement that you may have is someone who is not a manager wants to have access to the data. In that case, you will deal with the sharing rules. Is that clear? Now, there is one more concept, which is roles. Okay. Now, who is whose manager? What is the hierarchy? How Salesforce will understand what is your company's hierarchy? If Salesforce has a user, Ravi Teja, and it has another user as Sambit, so how will Salesforce understand who is manager, who is subordinate? And Salesforce needs to understand, right? If it just finds 5 users, how will it understand who is the manager? Who is the VP? So for that, Salesforce gives us an option to define our own organizational hierarchy using roles. Okay. So how do we do that? It's pretty simple. Under setup, manage users, there is something called roles. See this? Just above permission sets, you have an option called roles. Now this roles is where you will define your company's org structure. Okay, so whether you have a CEO or you have CFO under him, CEO, SVP, so whatever is your company structure, you can define here. You can remove all these. You see the option of deleting, you can remove all this and you can define the structure as per your requirement. In case in your company after CEO you just have SVP, or even if you do not have SVP, after CEO if you just have let's say a director, and then you have manager, and then you just have assistant managers, you can define it the way you want. You can delete everything and you can set it up the way you want. Alright. So this is the org structure. This is where you set up your org structure. Okay, and then you go to users. For a user, you have a field called role. You see, there's a field called role here for the user. So for any user, you can just go click on edit user and put him in a certain role. Let's say for this user, the role is CEO. For the other user, you put the role as CFO. Now, Salesforce will automatically understand based on the org hierarchy that you have said that who is on top of whom as per the role hierarchy. Clear? So this role thing is pretty simple. Again, as I said, role is not mandatory. It is an option for you whether you want to use the roles or not. This only comes into picture if you want to deal with these things, the org-wide defaults and the sharing settings and the sharing rules. Till the time you do not have that requirement, till the time you do not want to restrict the data access, till the time you do not want to give access to someone based on their hierarchy and all, you don't need rules. Okay, but profile, what we were discussing yesterday, that is mandatory. Okay, so again, you know, if you see 55 to 60% of the companies do not use roles. So if you see Salesforce projects, you know, maybe 55-60% of the companies do not even use roles. They do not even have the requirement of roles. So it's not something that every client uses, but yeah, this is something which you should be knowing, right? So from understanding perspective, I think you need to have a good understanding about this, but it's not used for every client. But profile is something which every company, every user has to have a profile. They cannot manage without profiles. Profile is mandatory, must. Okay. So now we have talked about 3 different concepts. If I have to, you know, put these concepts into, you know, specific buckets. First concept was how, you know, how does the identification process work for a certain user before he logs in. So that was the concept. Login time and IP address. Okay, so that was one concept where we talked about. So before login, what happens? So and how does Salesforce make sure that you know, the correct person is logging into the system? That was first. Second concept that we were talking about was related to the permissions that a user has. Right? In that we talked about profiles and permission sets. Okay, so we put all the permissions in a certain profile and we assign the profiles to the users. In case some user in the profile needs exceptional permissions or additional permissions which is not available to other users in the same profile, then we deal with the permission sets. Okay, so second concept was of the permissions. Third concept was of the data access. Okay, so you and me, we both can have same permission, but do you get to see my data and do I get to see your data? Permission wise there is no problem. You also have the permission to see accounts, I also have the permission to see accounts. Okay, so it's like you know, think of a company. Alright, so the company has given permission to, you know, 2 people, that okay, both of them can enter the office, both of them can go onto the floor, both of them can actually go and sit on their own desks and everything. But maybe they will have their own laptops, right? So whether you can use my laptop or not, whether I can use your laptop or not, that is the sharing part of it, right? So permission wise there is no problem, right? So same way, permission 2 people can have same, but the third concept which we have talked about is the data access, data sharing. Whether everyone will get to see everyone's data or only the record owner will get to see his data. Again, under that we talked about whether the managers need to see the subordinates data or not. Then we talked if someone else who is not even a manager wants to see their data, then sharing rules. Alright. So 3 concepts broadly we have talked about. There is one more concept that we are going to talk. Okay. What is that 4th concept? 4th concept is data admin permissions. Now this is also related to the data permission, but this is basically the data admin permission. Now what is this permission? These permissions are basically for people who need access to all the data. Okay, let's say we in our company we have Sambit, we have Ravali, we are all in sales team, let's say. Okay, we have Sambit, we have Ravali, we have Arpan, we have Nikhil, we have Ravi Teja. Okay, and for accounts the OWD is private. Okay, now do you think Ravali will get to see Arpan's data? The question is for Ravi Teja. Do you think Ravali will get to see Arpan's data, the data that Arpan owns? This is a setting. Will Ravali get to see Arpan's data?
Yes, sir. No.
Yes or no? Oh, wow.
No. The data admin says.
Yeah. So, no, I'm not talking about the data admin permission. Forget about data admin permission as of now. I'm just talking about general whatever we have learned so far. So, as per our understanding so far, Ravali should not have access to Arpan's data because the data is private, right? And the same goes with everyone else in this team. Because data is private, Sambit will not get to see Ravali's data, and he will not even get to see Nikhil's data. No, the company has hired one more people. You all are in sales team, okay? They hired me also. Okay? Now they have hired me, they want me to do the reporting. They want me to create reports. To create reports, what do I need to do? I need to see everyone's data. Otherwise, how will I create reports? Okay? Now, but I am just hired for doing reporting. I am not even manager of any one of you. Got it? But my role requires me to see everyone's data. Okay? So how will the company deal with this situation? There is one guy who is not even manager of anyone, but his job requires him to do reporting. And because I have to do reports, I need to see everyone's data. Now how does the company deal with this situation? If they make it public, it will become public for everyone. So making public is not a good option.
There should be some permissions, I think.
There should be some permission which allows me to see everyone's data. Alright? And those permissions should override your OWD permissions. Got that? OWD setting. Correct? So there is something called data admin permission. So if you give this permission to any particular user, or it's given to a profile. If you give this to a certain profile, then that particular user under that profile will have permission to see everyone's data, even the private data. Got it? So he gets a superpower to see everyone's data. Okay, and where is this permission given? Under profiles you can go and you can give this permission. So let me go to profile, custom marketing profile. So if you go to the profiles, and if you go to the object permissions under the profiles, you will see that there are two permissions called view all and modify all. We understand what is the read, create, edit, delete. So these permissions we understand. These two permissions, view all and modify all. Okay, view all, check the box in this column if you want users with this profile to have view access to all records of the selected object type regardless of the sharing settings for the object. So if you give view all to this profile, the users of this profile will have access to all the data under account. Even if you make accounts as private, this user still will have access to all the data. If you give a modify all permission, the user with this profile will have access to delete and create or edit all accounts. Fine. So this is normally given, that is the reason why it's called data admin permissions, data administration permissions. So this is usually given to database administrators, reporting people, or top level management guys, right? So if you have not maintained roles and everything, but there is a certain group of people which are the top level management, for them you can just give a view all and modify all. So these people will have the option of controlling the permissions, controlling the accounts of everyone, even if the accounts OWD has been set to private. Okay. So whether the data is public, private, whatever, they will get to see all the accounts, the users of this profile. Clear? So this view all and modify all.
Jit, we can give it for any anything there, right?
Any object. Is that what you are asking?
Anyone.
Yeah.
Oh.
So for every object we have that option. See, and against every object, account, campaign, whichever object you want, you can give it for that particular object.
Even for custom objects.
Scroll down, you have the same permissions for custom objects also. Candidates, jobs. Right? So this is something which can be given for any standard or custom object. Clear? So this is a special permission, some other tools call this permission as a super permission. So you can whatever best you find to remember it, but this is view all and modify all permission, which gives a certain user the permission to see all the data. So view all is of no use if the data is public. Again, going back to the same thing. If the data is made public, then there is no point of view all, because everyone gets to see everyone's data. So even if I have a view all permission, does not make a difference to what I can do. But it makes a lot of sense when the data is private. Okay. So if the data is private and I have a view all permission, I will see everyone's data. Okay. So any person in the organization there will be certain people in the organization, the reporting guys, the people who are doing the data management, update operations. The other day I was showing you the data management updates and inserts and deletes and all that stuff. Right. Now, if you are the person who deals with the bulk data management, and if you do not have that permission to create records or edit records which are owned by someone else, how will you do that? So for that, people who have to do these kind of activities, they need these permissions, view all and modify all. Are we clear on this? Please tell me if you have any questions on this.
Jit, if that new person is leaving, he is not going to stay for a longer time in the organization, then you can revert the settings again, right? You can remove the data administration permissions, right?
I mean, see, basically this is coming either from his profile or the permission set. This is again a permission, right? So okay. It's not, if it's coming through the permission set, then permission set is for particular user, right? So when you deactivate the user, anyhow he does not have that permission. The user is not there, no more permission set for him. But if you are talking about the profile thing, then you'll have to go and make changes in the profile.
Okay.
Right. Or sometimes it may happen, let's say there is a reporting analyst, for example. The profile that you have created for this guy is reporting the analyst profile.
Right.
And you have put this permission. Now I am leaving the company, that is okay. But maybe Ravi is joining, and you can just give the same profile to Ravi. Then what will happen in that case? You don't even have to change, because if I leave that job and someone else joins in there, the same profile can be given to that person. Yeah, if you want to revoke back that permission from the profile itself, then you should go and make the change.
Yeah, nobody is going to occupy that particular position. It's only for a few days.
Yeah, if it is for a few days and you want to revoke, you can revoke that. Just go and check it off. That is it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
One more question I have, Jit.
Please go ahead.
Let's say there are thousands of users, and out of them there are hundreds of reporting analysts. So how do you give this profile to all the analysts? Manually, or there is a method to upload it backend,
No, so
like
for
data
all the
loader?
reporting analysts, you will have the same profile, right?
Yeah.
So you just have to go and change it in the profile. Let's say there is this profile name is what? Marketing profile. Okay. Instead of it, think of it as a reporting analyst profile. Now this profile is assigned to all those 100 users, right? So once you go and check it here, it is
No,
automatically
initially
applicable
there
to
is,
everyone.
let's say initially these profiles are not there. The user is just joined, and you want we want to update the profile of this 100 user. How can you update that?
Okay. So when you are creating a user, so there are 100 users, right? So when you
Yeah.
try to create a new user, you always have to assign a profile for that user, right? So the moment you are creating a user, the user needs to have a profile, certain profile. You cannot create a user without a profile. So while you're creating the user details, at that time you should make sure that before you create the users, you have created that profile and you keep on assigning that profile to those users.
So for that
So
100 users, there should be a profile being created.
Yeah.
uh, so this user, there is no way to create this user using that data loader.
That can be done, but user is also a table, data can be inserted, but before that, profile has to be there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
We
can
need to
create
create profile.
users through data loader. So if that is a question, that can be done. My point is that you have to have some profile, or you'll have to assign some other profile and then you have to update to that profile, right?
Yeah. First you have to create the profile and you have
And then
to
assign, yeah, can be done, yes.
yeah.
So for that profile, you give the permissions which will reflect for all the 100 users.
See,
Sir.
if you have users like this, let's say, just one second, if you have users like this, 1, 2, and this ways if we have. So for all these, you have to, assign that profile, whatever your reporting analyst profile, that needs to be assigned to everyone. Got it? This is what we have to do. For user 1, 2, 3, 4, 100, whatever, we have to make sure that we assign them the reporting analyst profile if they want a reporting analyst profile. Got that thing?
Right.
So that is how it is. So how it works in a company when there are 1,000 people in the same department? We don't create department for them every now and then. We assign that department to this guy is from marketing department. He will go and sit in that corner. So we don't create things for every person. The profile is already created. Same profile is being assigned to the new user every time a new user is being created. Got it? So that is how it is working.
Yes, Chief, got it.
Okay. There was one more question I think someone was asking.
Sir, is there anything like restricted for chatter purpose? I mean, something which no one can see in, because, sometimes, it's by law you can't see the chat conversations. And all.
Sorry, I do not understand that part. Can you explain once again? For chatter, what do you want to
Like,
restrict?
is there anything like, I mean to say, sir, a kind of restricted, sir, restricted wherein, no one can see any data. I mean, even though you're a manager and all. For that you have to do a custom thing. I mean, like for an example, charters, CHATTS. You don't want, the chart communications for the manager to be seen. I mean, sometimes, it's too personal, right? Even though it's within the organization. So
Why,
that kind of data.
why will you talk personal things in the office?
But still, yeah, we do. I mean, we do a lot of in-link and all the chart, right? I mean,
Okay. So let's not get into the chatter thing specifically, but if you're talking about the data part, if you have, let's say on a certain user's profile, if you have not given him a read permission on a certain object, you will not get to see data in that particular object. So it can be anyone. On the profile, we just view all, modify all, right? Beside that, we had read permission, read, create, edit, delete. If the person has not been given read permission, he cannot see data in that object. Right. Let's say you don't want me to see opportunities. So just go to my profile and remove the read permission from there. So I will not get to see any opportunity.
Yeah. Does business ask for any such scenarios, sir, where no one should see the data, even the data admin? Like for an example, calendar. You don't want. I think Salesforce allows you to not only do the sales part of it, but you can manage all your day-to-day activities as well, right? Like
Activities.
Your paychecks. I mean, payroll, like things.
Okay.
So, you don't want that kind of information as well. So, for that, you probably may use this kind of options, right?
Okay. So that is by default what Salesforce administrator has permissions. He can see everything. Okay. If you want, you can definitely go and restrict system administrator from whatever you want. Okay. But in that case, you will have to go and create a custom profile. Standard Salesforce profile allows everyone to. So as I think, Ravali was saying that why would you want to restrict certain things from everyone? So most of the companies would not want to do that. For that reason, in the standard thing, most of the companies prefer that the system administrator should have access to everything. But if that is the requirement of your company, then you should use the custom profile. Okay, and that kind of data should be only stored in a custom object. But that I told you OWD that if you want certain data to be completely private, even the manager should not see that, then we only can use custom objects. So standard Salesforce objects do not allow us to do that. Correct? So if you want
agree, sir.
fine. All right. Okay. So any other questions on this? Do we have any more questions on this thing? We are all good? Okay, great. So I think that is what we had to discuss today. Tomorrow, once we meet, we are going to discuss on a few more aspects, and we are going to talk on some scenario also. So just go back, look into these things, work on this, and we meet tomorrow, same time, same link, right?